Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to take a look at my favorite healer, Holy Paladin, and how to play it in the War Within for Mythic Plus. So we're just going to take a look at some of the general changes coming out of Dragonflight, the talents including the new hero talents, and then of course the damage and healing rotations. So with that, let's just jump right into it. So the most notable change for Holy Paladin coming out of Dragonflight is just going to be the removal of Glimmer of Light and Daybreak. But in turn, we had our Holy Shock and our Holy Power Spenders buffed significantly, which feels really nice for the spec. Alright guys, so let's just jump right into the talents. So this season, we have something called Hero Talents, and we're going to be playing the Herald of the Sun Hero Talents. And there's a few notable talent nodes that we're going to talk about. The first is going to be something called Dawnlight. So casting Holy Prism or Barrier of Faith causes your next two Holy Power spending abilities to apply Dawnlight on your target, dealing X amount of damage and X amount of healing over 8 seconds. 8% of Dawnlight's damage and healing radiates to nearby allies or enemies, reduced beyond 5 targets. So this is huge. You have Dawnlights out pretty much all the time, and this is going to tie in with a lot of the other talents. But the way you're going to want to be min-maxing this now is you're going to want to be hitting Holy Prism basically on cooldown. And then if you want to be min-maxing this with damage, you're going to want to be using your Shield of Righteous for your next two spenders on an enemy, right? But Dawnlights are going to be massive. The next talent I want to talk about is going to be called Eternal Flame. So Eternal Flame is going to just replace Word of Glory. It essentially is Word of Glory, just with a hot attached to it. And it's not so massive that you need to be pre-planning and pre-Word of Glorying or pre-Eternal Flaming people, but it is just some free extra healing. The most important talent I do want to talk about though inside of this tree is going to be something called Sun's Avatar. So Sun's Avatar, during Avenging Wrath, you become linked to your Dawnlights, causing X amount of radiant damage to enemies and X amount to allies that pass through the beams, right? So this is Laser Beam Holy Paladin that everybody has seen. These are these beams that come out of you, and as you pass through allies or you pass through enemies, it does damage. It feels really amazing. Now, activating Avenging Wrath applies up to 4 Dawnlights onto nearby allies or enemies. So it is going to be really important that when you use your Avenging Wrath, when you use your wings, that you are making sure these beams are going through the enemies. Now, Sun's Avatar is going to be your top damage, if not right up there amongst your top damage abilities. So you need to be min-maxing these beams. So the first talent here I want to talk about is going to be Light of the Martyr. So Light of the Martyr has been changed. It is now a passive buff to Holy Shock, but it leaves a heal absorb on you. So the way we mitigate that this season, really easy. If you look over at Eternal Flame, healing increased by 25% when cast on yourself. So you can basically just mitigate this heal absorb by every here and there casting an Eternal Flame on yourself. And I have to say, when you take the other talent, Bestow Light, that just builds into it, it ends up buffing Holy Shock by 40%, which is so substantial we really can't pass it up this season. The next talent I wanted to talk about is going to be Veneration. So the reason we're taking Veneration is because we dropped Inflorescence of the Sunwell. And the reason that we're dropping that this season, and a lot of other talents that go along with it, like Divine Revelations and Tower of Radiance, is because we're just not casting much at this point. Pretty much all of our healing is coming from Holy Shock, Eternal Flame, and a bit of Beacon at this point. There really is just no reason to ever be hard casting unless you don't have either of those options available and you have a Divine Favor proc available with an Infusion of Light. Otherwise, there is never a reason on Holy Paladin at this point in the season to be casting. So let's talk briefly about Blessing of Summer. So the great thing about Blessing now is it can be cast on yourself. And the way that you're going to want to min-max the damage out of this is you're going to want to line it up with all of your big cooldowns. So your Wings, your Divine Toll, and your Virtue. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pop Blessing of Summer, hit your Wings, hit your Virtue, and then heal for as much as you possibly can. And do keep in mind, overhealing does count on this. So you're just going to want to heal, and that is going to convert into damage. And Blessing of Summer does do a ton of damage for us if you play it correctly. And the biggest talent I wanted to talk about, guys, is just going to be Beacon of Virtue. So there's a lot of back and forth on this in the Paladin community, Beacon of Virtue versus Beacon of Faith. So I do favor Beacon of Faith in raid environments, but in keys, Beacon of Virtue is huge. And the reason for that is the damage patterns in Mythic Plus are very bursty damage patterns. And even though our triage healing and our holy shock and our eternal flame, all of that has been buffed a lot this season, it can be very difficult to heal that bursty AoE damage on Paladin, especially outside of wings. And Beacon of the Virtue is just going to be our crutch to get through that. Additionally, though, we take a talent up here called Light's Protection, where allies with Beacon of Light receive 5% less damage, and this does apply with Beacon of Virtue. So you're almost going to want to be using it preemptively this season instead of reactively. That way your allies can get that 5% DR2 mechanics as well. Alright, so now let's quickly go over the rotation. So the first thing you're always going to want to be doing is keeping down Consecrate. So Consecrate is uncapped AoE. It just does it there passively sitting there, and it's just a GCD every 12 seconds. Consecrate is going to do a massive portion of our damage. We also have a talent interaction with it called Strength of Conviction. While in Consecration, your Shield of Righteous and your Word of Glory have 10% increased damage and healing. So this is just going to also be buffing our Holy Power spenders, whether that be damage or healing. So very big, always keep down Consecrate. The next thing that you're going to want to be doing is keeping Holy Shock on cooldown. So Holy Shock is now doing a massive amount of our damage and our healing. It's our best button at this point. It really feels just like it used to. Very strong, very powerful. You want to be keeping it on cooldown. Next, you'll be keeping Judgment on cooldown, and there's a couple reasons for this. First and foremost, we take a talent over here called Righteous Judgment, where Judgment has a 50% chance to cast Consecration at the target's location, and this does overlap with your own Consecration, and several of these overlap, so you can have a ton of these out, and we already talked about the power that that can have. The second reason is going to be over here. We have a talent choice called Greater Judgment, where Judgment is also just preventing damage that the enemy's doing to its target. So someone like your tank in keys is just going to be, instead of even healing the damage, it's going to be preventing it ahead of time. Next, we're going to want to be keeping Holy Prism on cooldown. And the reason for that is going to be because of our Dawnlight talent in the Herald of the Sun talents, which we talked about earlier, where every time you cast Holy Prism, your next two Holy Power spenders proc these Dawnlights. And these Dawnlights are a critical part of how Holy Paladin is going to play this season. So make sure you're hitting Holy Prism on cooldown. From there, you're going to want to be hitting Crusader Strike. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but it does build one Holy Power, and it also reduces the cooldown of our Judgment and our Holy Shock, which, as we already know, are pretty high up there in the priority list. So this just gives us more damage, more healing. It's just good all around. From there, we're going to want to be hitting Hammer of Wrath. And the reason for this is simply going to be because we have the Veneration talent. Hammer of Wrath is not doing a ton for us. The damage isn't amazing or anything. But again, it does generate one Holy Power, and it is going to do a good amount of passive healing for us. Now, there are still a few things to talk about with the rotation. So let's say we're in this situation where I have all of my abilities up and ready, but I have 5 Holy Power. You are going to want to be spending that Holy Power. The biggest thing with Paladin is do not sit on Holy Power and do not overcap Holy Power. So in this situation, we're going to want to be spending it on one of two things in Mythic Plus. For damage, you're going to be using it on Shield of the Righteous. For healing, it is always going to be used on Eternal Flame. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is just quickly how to min-max your damage on Holy Paladin in keys a little bit. Basically when to use Holy Power to damage or when to be using it to heal. So in AoE situations, in trash mobs, things of that nature, you're going to want to be using your Holy Power on Shield of Righteous, and you're going to want to be using your Holy Shock to heal people. And the reason for this is your Shield of Righteous is just going to do more in an AoE profile. On the reverse side, if you're in a single target fight, like a boss fight, your Holy Shock is going to do more damage than your Shield of Righteous, and I highly advise you to be healing with your Eternal Flames and Holy Shocking for damage. If you're looking to min-max the most damage, that's how you'll get it out of those two situations. If you did find the video helpful, guys, and you would consider dropping a like and subscribe down below, I really appreciate it, and it really helps a small channel grow. Also, if you would like a free download to my Mythic Plus Talents loadout, I'll leave that linked in the description down below. But that's going to wrap it up for today, and I'll see you next time.